Hello everyone, welcome to Twilight. If you have anything to say related to the video or notice any issues, let us know in the comments. For now, enjoy the video. What if Edward's pre-planned betrayal tore Bella apart? The whole summer? I repeated. My voice sounded flat. Edward didn't reply. After a moment he reached across the table for my hand, but I surprised myself by pulling it away. What do you mean the whole summer? He couldn't have. I don't. Is this important? He asked. His shoulders had slumped. I'm here now. I'm not going anywhere. I swear to you, Bella. I held his gaze. He looked back with that sideways smile that experience had taught me was often a mask. I thought about what he'd just told me. Finally I spoke. When you left me, I said carefully, when did you decide to do that? The half-smile was gone. His face was as pale as I'd ever seen it. I knew I had to find a way after James. My teeth clenched as I sucked in air. I braced my hands against the table, searching for something to hold on to. You planned it? Yes, he whispered. It felt as though that quiet word echoed around the kitchen and rang right through me. You were planning to leave me from May to September, I repeated. My voice sounded hollow. Yes, he whispered again. So the whole time, I said, my voice suddenly going from empty to full as my volume rose, and my words ran together. The whole summer, the summer I thought was the best of my life, when I felt so lucky to have you, when you promised me you were mine every moment together. You were planning when to leave? He leaned forward quickly. It wasn't he interjected, but I spoke over him. Why didn't you just do it at the start of the summer? Then, instead of lying through your teeth for months, what were you waiting for? I searched his eyes. I was almost surprised to see he looked just the same when my view of him was shifting so completely. It felt like an earthquake was shaking the ground under my feet. How was he standing through the earthquake unhurt? He winced as I spoke. As soon as I took a breath, his response came back quick and urgent. It was almost too fast for my ears to catch. You think I enjoyed lying to you, Bella? I was gathering the strength. I wasn't strong enough, but I knew I had to figure out how to be. I knew it wasn't safe for you. I had to give you a chance to live your life. I did it because I loved you. I love you, Bella. I found myself staring abstractly at the stove over his shoulder as he spoke. His words felt like they were coming from very far away. The whole summer, every day, all those nights. Please, Bella, I didn't know what else to do. You have no idea how hard it. No, my eyes narrowed as they snapped back to meet his. Without thinking, I threw up my hand as if to physically stop his words. Don't you dare. Don't you dare tell me how hard it was for you. I knew once I heard his pain, my sympathy for him would override my rationality, and I wouldn't be able to stay mad. And at this moment, I very much wanted to stay mad. Determined to hold my resolve, I forced myself to think of how the time without him had felt. The emptiness, the hole in my stomach, the detachment from everyone around me, feeling like I was on the other side of glass while the world spun on. It hurt to remember, but it worked. Edward, I said, I want you to go home now. I need to process this. I was surprised by how calm my voice sounded. That was good. I was worried he wouldn't agree if he knew how close to tears I was. You want me to leave? Edward said. Really, I wasn't sure if I wanted that, and when I'd said it I was only half sure I would be okay with him leaving. But his words reminded me of that day last September when he had decided to lie. You don't want me? I had said when he told me, and he had said, no. But it hit me that day last September hadn't been when he'd decided to lie. That's precisely what he was telling me right now. It hadn't been a knee-jerk panic. It had been a deliberate lie, a million lies building every day for months. I am so mad at you, I began, and this time I had to fight hard to keep my voice low, which made my jaw clench that I want to scream. He stared at me. I deserve it. Shout at me. Whatever you need, he said, and he spread his hands wide, palms out, as if welcoming my anger. I looked at his left pinky, unable to bring myself to look at his lying face. And I really was tempted to shout, because a vindictive new part of me wanted to hurt him. My adrenaline surged, and I felt my nose and mouth scrunch as my lip curled. I dug my nails into my leg. That focused me, and I realized that if I did want to hurt him, sending him away was the lowest blow I could deliver. I looked straight in his eyes. I will see you in school tomorrow, I said. He didn't move. Get out, I growled, the back of my teeth clenching together. I had a brief glimpse of the pain in his eyes, and then it was gone as he slipped out the door in a blur. I stood up too, and dragged myself upstairs. I got ready for bed slowly, grateful Charlie was covering a junior officer's night shift, and had therefore left me home alone. It was hard not to let my anger completely overwhelm me. I suppose this was the fight in fight or flight. My emotions felt entirely physical. The barely controlled anger pushed nearly all thoughts of the cause out of my mind. But when I did recall the source of my anger, when I thought about his words, his lies, it made my breathing ragged and my stomach flip. Yes, better to embrace the fight than to feel the extent of this hurt. I recalled the image of his eyes as he'd turned to leave. The pain was not as strong as I had seen Jane inflict on him in Italy, but it was a clear echo of it. And, strangely, I again felt my vindictive side from the kitchen revel in his pain. I felt so betrayed. I burned with the hurt and anger, and I wanted to make him burn with me as punishment. That burning feeling gave me the energy to go through the motions of getting ready for bed until, in leaning to turn off the bedside light, I saw the picture of us I kept there. A gift from Renesmee, my angel, with his tousled hair and half-smile, staring down at an innocent version of me, while I smiled shyly back at him. It had been taken that summer. Suddenly I was sobbing. I turned off the light and let the sobs rock through me. It felt hard to breathe. In the darkness, I groped for the picture and shoved it in the drawer of my bedside table. The drawer banged as I shut it. My thoughts were wild now. He didn't love me enough to tell me the truth. We're not partners. He lied. Every moment was a lie. He lied. He let me fall more and more in love. He lied. Our relationship is built on a lie. My breathing felt so tight that a distant corner of my brain wondered how close I was to a panic attack. I wrapped my hands around my knees and sobbed into my pillow. The perverse part of it was that the sobs made me yearn for his security, his cool arms firmly around me. I was so tempted to call his name. I knew he was probably pacing outside or crouched in the tree, listening. But that thought made me sob even harder. Because were those cool arms really secure? I had thought them secure from May to September, too. All a lie. As my sobs reached their peak, I heard his distinct tapping pattern on the window. I imagined I was scaring him. Good. Without thinking, I groped through the darkness for one of the pillows I'd pushed to the floor. The moment my fist found it, I hurled it at the window. "Go away!" I screamed. The anger calmed my breathing again, and eventually, I fell asleep. I felt calmer in the morning. The crying had cleared my head. Still, everything was different now. I felt it. This earthquake hadn't left cracks. It had demolished my foundation. My eyes looked puffy in the mirror, but a few splashes of cold water helped, and I figured they'd be all right by school. A little off, maybe, but again the vindictive side danced. Let him see what he'd done to me. My reflection blinked in surprise at this cruel though. I found I had no appetite. So I dressed and headed straight to the door. When I stepped outside, left boot only half on, I could see the nose of the silver Volvo peeking out from the edge of the road. For a moment I wanted nothing more than to walk up to it. I could let him race to open the door for me and pretend nothing had happened. Then I looked at the truck bed and remembered the summer evenings we'd spent lying in it, when we'd been so happy. No, I reminded myself when I'd been so happy, and he'd been lying. When he'd been letting me fall deeper in love, knowing he would hurt me as soon as he could. I stood up from adjusting my boot, walked down the stairs, and put my keys in the door to unlock my truck. "I'm sorry, Edward," I said. My voice was barely above a whisper, but I knew he'd be able to hear. I climbed into my truck. I didn't see the Volvo in my rear view mirror once on my drive. He was trying to give me my distance, I guessed. It didn't matter. I felt numb. School was a struggle. We were in all the same classes, but most of the teachers at Forks didn't assign seats for their senior classes. So I made a point to sit on the opposite sides of the room from our normal desks in each classroom. I knew I was annoying. A few kids' seats may not be assigned, but everyone naturally gravitated towards the same seat by that point. I didn't care, and I figured my mood must have been noticeable, because no one said anything. That gave me time to think. I knew he was the love of my life. I wanted to have a way forward for us, a way through my anger. It made my stomach churn to think about how we were after last night, and it hurt not to see a way forward yet. It hurt even more when I thought about his months of lies. What I needed was to let myself not think about him for a while. Admittedly, the silent tactic was a little childish, but it was genuinely all I felt up to. I hoped he would take the hint. The palpability of my mood was confirmed when I overheard Jessica make a comment to Lauren after our second period calculus class. "Do you think he cheated?" Jessica whispered, not quietly enough, just after the bell rang to signal the break. I swear Bella was about to snap her pencil in half for half that period, and Edward looks like he's going to go home and arg. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw her drag her right index finger across her throat to demonstrate. Guilt bloomed within me. This tested my resolve for ignoring Edward. I almost turned back to tell him I'd see him at lunch, but the thought of having to talk to him again, either forgive him or fight with him again, made me feel nauseous. I shoved the guilt back down. Fight hurts less than flight, I reminded myself, and I stomped out of the classroom, without letting my gaze turn to the right, where my peripheral vision told me he was still in his seat. Third period was a blur of anger, which was convenient since Coach Clapp was trying to teach us how to lift weights. Fourth period honors U.S. history was spent trying to hold back my tears. That time, it was Edward who raced out of the classroom at the bell. At lunch I volunteered to help my homeroom set up our submission for the end-of-the-year door decorating competition. Any excuse to avoid the cafeteria. After lunch, it seemed he'd taken the hint and decided to stop coming to class. I felt a twinge of guilt when the bell to start class rang and he wasn't there, but mostly I felt a release in being alone. While I normally only spoke when called on in our classes, I threw myself into our round-table discussion on The Great Gatsby. I was able to throw in a few points about Gatsby's controlling, selfish lies, which did make me feel a tiny bit better. When the bell finally rang after my 6th period AP psychology course, the dread crept back into my stomach. I had hoped that by the end of the day I'd feel more ready to talk this through like an adult. Instead, with the distraction of school over and the thought of the long weekend filled with unpacking this, I just felt numb. Probably my default reaction after months of practice while he was gone, I thought darkly. I trudged out to my car. Even though I was prepared for him to be there, the sight of him standing in the parking lot with his face turned towards me, and his hands braced against the upper frame of my truck, took my breath away. Edward was as beautiful as ever, but he looked terrible. His eyes, which had been flaked with gold yesterday, were now a deep, shark-like black, and his face again held the same tortured expression that Jane had induced. I was suddenly gripped by a strong desire to pull him into the truck cab with me, let him lay his head on my lap, and stroke his hair in comfort. Liar, I reminded myself as I walked slowly toward the edge of the parking lot where he and my truck stood. I stopped myself at the bed of the truck, not trusting myself not to reach out to him if I got any closer. Bella, he whispered, and the rush of pain in his voice nearly undid my resolve. I forced myself to focus on counting my breaths while I thought of what to say. I made it to 4 before he spoke urgently. I can give you whatever you need. I can understand your anger. But please, Bella, please just tell me what you're thinking. I need to know what I need to know where we stand. I laughed, and the sound was harsh even to my ears. Oh, you need to know where we stand? No shit, I'd like to know that too. I don't know where we stand or even how I stand by myself, I said, and it felt less like I was talking to him, and more like I was rambling to the air. I couldn't even look at him. When he didn't reply, I spoke again, my voice breaking. I have this giant pile of emotions in me now. Thanks to you, my arm swung wide on the word giant as if to demonstrate a hopeless attempt at getting him to understand, and I have no clue how to deal with them. I expected him to speak immediately, to rush to brush aside my doubts and concerns as he usually did, but he stayed silent for a long moment. I kept staring at the forest behind him, as I tried to decide which of that ocean of emotions felt strongest. I knew if I looked at his beautiful face I would cave. After watching a squirrel climb across a tree and onto the school roof, I finally spoke again. I know I love you, I said quietly, and I heard a slight exhale of relief. But I think there were enormous pauses between my words, as I tried to fit this mess of emotions into thoughts. I don't know how to love you right now. I finally looked at him then, and his face looked broken for a brief moment. Then that eerie mask of calm that I knew so well returned. I understand, he whispered finally. His back was ramrod straight, but he looked like he was using the truck to prop himself up. Again I had the urge to reach out and pull him to me, to smooth out that posture, and run my hands through his hair, and whisper reassurances of my love. Suddenly I hoped maybe I had misunderstood. Surely this beautiful man, this man I loved so much, couldn't have plotted my pain. A thought occurred to me. Edward, I asked. Yes, why did you? I mean, Alice must have seen what would happen. I looked at my feet. I felt embarrassed now. Did she not see what would happen to me? What happened to me? Was what she saw different from how we actually reacted? Is that why you were able to go through with it? I waited for him to say it wasn't, that he hadn't known. It was the only explanation I could fit into his declarations of love that summer. It was the only explanation I could fit with my understanding of us. I waited a long moment. She saw, he admitted. I couldn't identify the emotion in his words, and his eyes looked guarded. So you knew. I had hoped. I stopped him. That's fine. You don't need to say any more. I get it. It wasn't he started, and again I spoke over him. I get it. Really, it's fine. Suddenly I was glad for all the practice I'd had stopping myself crying these past few months. That had been for Charlie's sake, but now I stopped myself for my own sake to keep some of my agency. He grabbed my arm. Bella, listen to me, he said urgently. His grip was gentle, but it sent a thrill of almost physical pain through me that stole my breath. I saw myself pulling it out of his grasp, but it felt almost like I was watching a movie. Don't! I nearly shouted. He stepped back so quickly that I almost didn't see him move. I took a deep breath and dug my nails into my palm, in an attempt to calm myself. Another trick I'd picked up during the dark months. I need space from you, I said. It took what little emotional processing I had left to realize this. Once again his dark eyes reminded me of how they had looked under Jane's gaze. But you're everywhere. I can't get that space in Forks, I realized. He braced his hand on the bed of the truck once again, as my words hit him. Bella, whatever you need, of course I can respect, he started, and I held up a hand. No, I said. I don't think you can. You didn't last night when I asked for it. You stayed outside all night, didn't you? I searched Edward's gaze suspiciously. Again, his guarded look blocked me. That's what I thought. I felt my chin jutting out as my resolve set. No, I need to think. I need to go somewhere I can think without you breathing down my neck. Suddenly I realized what I needed. Edward, I'm going to go to La Push for the weekend. No, Bella. His words were almost too quick for me to understand, but his eyes were white and wild. You don't have to do that. Please, do not put yourself in danger for me. I promise, I can step back for however long you want. Whatever you need. I can stay at my house, or leave Forks for a while. Whatever you tell me to do, I can do it. I can leave. That bothered me for some reason. Not only did it feel wrong for me to drive him from town, but suddenly an intrusive thought arose. What was I? The witch driving out the vampire? It annoyed me to think of him running away and waiting, while I did all the work of sorting this out. It was enough to steel me against his persuasion. I let the venom seep back into my voice like I had last night. Is that really the only way you know how to handle a situation? To run away, sulk, and be sad? Because that is what you'll do if I ask you to leave for a time, right? His face froze as he took in my accusation. Yeah, that's what I thought, I said. Well, I'm going to La Push so I can have my space and my friends and a place to think. I can't control what you do. But maybe you should do some thinking about why your first instinct is yet again to run away instead of stay. In fact, you could, I don't know, lean on your family, do a little personal growth, reflect a little on how you could lie to your girlfriend for 5 months straight, and then run away? Would that be too hard? Or are you really stuck as the same immature 17-year-old forever? The words sank into the bonds between us, and I wondered how much damage they would leave. Suddenly I didn't trust myself to say any more without crying. My heart was pounding with anger again. It was a little embarrassing knowing how loud it must be to him. I pushed past him to get in my truck, shoved my keys in the ignition, and exhaled in relief as the engine roared to life. When I shifted into first, he finally took one step away from the car. I drove away without looking in the rear view mirror. I started to feel guilty almost right away. It had felt good in the moment to give Edward something to chew on, but now I mostly felt sad. The vampire frozen at 17 thing was a really, really low dig, and I knew it. I spent a few minutes of the drive home trying to justify it to myself as tough love, but I couldn't quite sell it. I suppose it probably was what had stopped him from freaking out my decision to spend the weekend with werewolves, at least. What did it even matter? It was just another of the many cuts I could see now were between us. He hurt me. I hurt him. He hurt me. I hurt him. I kept checking my rear view mirror, unsure as to if I wanted to see him there or not. No, I definitely didn't. Seeking a distraction, I turned on the radio to my favorite channel, 107.7 The End. I laughed out loud when I heard what was playing. How fitting, I thought. I turned it up as loud as I could stand, which was still only about a fraction of the speaker's abilities, since Edward had replaced Emmett's stereo gift, and sang along. But you didn't have to me off, I sang with gaudy. Make out like it never happened and that we were nothing. Admittedly, I was more shrieking than singing now. And I don't even need your love. I was a little out of breath now, but this felt good. But you treat me like a stranger, and that feels so rough. Ouch. You didn't have to stoop so low, have your friends collect your records and then change your number to real. Now you're just somebody that I used to know. Somebody I was dimly aware of. A few tears falling now, and I struggled to choke out the last few words. as the song shifted to melancholy again and started to fade out. Damn. The song replayed in my head the rest of the drive. I couldn't decide if the emotion of it was more mad or sad. I still hadn't decided by the time I got to Jake's. I had done the drive on autopilot. It felt like I looked up and I was just at Jake's. I hadn't even thought about whether to come here. It just felt like the place to go. I pulled the parking brake and just sat there, my eyes unfocused as I stared unseeingly in the direction of his red garage. I sat there, unmoving. It felt like all the energy had drained out of me. Not to mention, I didn't even know if anyone was home. What was I doing? I rotated 90 degrees in the cab, so that my back was leaning against the truck door, and my feet were up on the cab bench. I put my hands up over my face and started to sob quietly. I felt totally overwhelmed by the questions and stressors running through my head. Firstly, I felt so confused, like I barely. Just then, out of nowhere, the car door gave way from my back, and I was screaming as I tilted backgrounds over the edge of the car frame. My stomach lurched as I dropped. Strong hands were there to catch me, of course. Warm hands, accompanied by warm laughter. Jesus Christ, Jake, I shouted. Don't do that. Jake tilted me back into the truck and stepped back for me to get out, almost struggling to breathe through his laughter. It took him a few moments of laughter before he really looked at me. When he did, he immediately rushed towards me, reaching out to hold my head between his big hands. Wait, Bella, are you crying? What's wrong? Are you okay? I'm fine, Jake, I said, brushing away his hands. I don't want to talk about. Jake's eyes went wide suddenly, as though a thought occurred to him. When he spoke next, he sounded mad. What did he do? He said coolly. He looked me up and down. I looked back, silently. It was hard not to break down when he looked at me like that. Bella, he did hurt you. Did he try to turn you? Are you okay? Jake's voice sounded strangled now, but I also the alpha intensity coming through. No, of course not, he would never. And stop with the inspection, I said, a bit bitterly, because I could see Jake frantically looking me up and down. Bella, did he leave you? Jake's voice was almost a whisper now, the way you would speak to a frightened animal or traumatized child. I sucked in air in a low gasp. I couldn't help it. It felt like someone punched me in the gut, reminding me of the wound he'd created when he left, and how I now knew he'd been planning that wound for months. No, focus. No, Jake, please, I don't want to talk about it. I just needed somewhere to get away to think. Do you think maybe I could stay here for the long weekend? I could hear the desperation in my voice, and I figured Jake would too. I remembered how Jake had been a son during the most difficult time of my life, chasing away my dark clouds. I needed a son for a little while. Jake stared at me for a long moment, seeming to wrestle with his desire to know more. But Jake had always had an instinct for when to push me, and when to leave me alone with me thoughts, and he knew most of the time I preferred the latter. Finally, he nodded, and I released the breath I hadn't realized I was holding. Fine, he agreed. Then, seeming to come alive like a light bulb being switched on, his face broke out into a wide grin. That smile reminded me of the young Jake, the version I had first met almost 2 years ago now. Wanna order a pizza? You're buying, of course. I grinned back. Of course I am. Hop in. I idly wondered where Edward was. I'd wondered the same thing every 5 minutes since I'd arrived. It was painful to think of him, but I had a lot of practice in managing unwelcome feelings now. In the last year, I'd gotten good at not thinking about things, especially him, when I wanted to. Was this coping mechanism healthy? Probably not, but it's the one my messed up brain had developed. I knew I'd have to unpack it all later, but not just yet. Thanks very much. I felt a bit better after a few hours of Jake's funny stories and upbeat energy. We were eating on overturned crates in the garage. The last slices of our 2 extra larges, half the veggie for me, the meat lovers, and half the veggie for Jake, propped open on the floor between us. It would be our last time working on my bike, apparently. Charlie had wanted to destroy it after Jake had revealed the bike to him in a fit of anger after my flight to Italy, but I had begged on Jake's behalf to at least let Jake sell the bike. Hiding it wouldn't have worked. Jake said that Charlie had already checked in on the garage twice while visiting Billy to check if the bike was gone yet. I had had a wild thought of asking Edward to buy it and keep it in his garage, but I would never ask Edward to spend so much money on me, and besides, Edward would never support me doing something so dangerous. It didn't matter. Jake had already sold it to an older kid who was coming back to the res from college for the summer, and was just giving it its final tune-ups before it changed hands to the new owner. My heart broke a little at the thought of seeing my little bike zipping across the reservation under someone else's power. I longed to give it one more ride, to feel the freedom and adrenaline that came from coaxing more speed and doing something I knew was dangerous. I blinked, surprised by my own thoughts. Danger, adrenaline, since when had that appealed to me? I needed to distract myself. I grasped for a conversation starter. How do you know I was here, anyway? I asked in between bites of the veggie pizza. Jake's answering grin looked almost evil. I was on patrol and heard something weird on 110. At first I thought it was someone screaming for help. Turns out it was just a familiar voice shrieking along to the radio. You what? I spluttered. My cheeks warmed. We've got to do karaoke night in Port Angeles sometime, Jake said solemnly. I don't know what you're talking about, I replied, feigning composure. You know, why wait for Port Angeles? Maybe we need a new project. Wanna start a garage band? Stuffing the last crust in his mouth, Jake dusted the crumbs off his hands and turned his attention to my bike, which he'd apparently been working on a bit this week. It was by the grace of God that the bike was here at all. If Charlie had had his way, the bike would probably have been burned in a bit, but I had begged him to let Jake sell it, after the weeks of work he'd put into it. Sure, I said, going along with his joke. I know you're not that busy at night, you probably need a hobby. Hey, I'm a Renaissance man. Run with the pack at night, fix motorcycles by day, play drums in the evening. There's time for everything when you're not dating. I tensed at that, but a covert look at Jake told me his posture was relaxed, as much as it could be given he was wrestling with some part on the bike. This didn't feel like a deliberate play at my emotions. I forced myself to keep an easy tone too. Ah, well, I'm sure we could fix that for you. Does this mean you're open to looking? As I said it, I suddenly realized I wasn't sure what I wanted the answer to be. I felt transported back to right before Alice and Edward came back into my life. That night after the cliff jumping, when I'd started to realize that my friendship with Jake could turn into something more. A relationship built on warmth, ease, fun. Part of what held me back during that time was knowing my feelings for Edward would never die. And that was still true, of course. I loved Edward. I knew that. But it was like my brain had put up a block against thinking of him. Right now, Edward wasn't here. It felt like a whole half of my brain wasn't either. That brought me to the other major concern of mine during that time. Had been that I wasn't sure if I was too broken to be deserving of Jacob. But now, I didn't feel broken. Edward had come back. If I went with Jake, it would be because it was my choice. There, got it, Jake grunted, breaking my rumination with a clang as he dropped the wrench he had been wrestling with. What was your question? Oh, if I want to date. Ugh, I don't know if I'm looking. It's hard when I can't tell people who I really am. It feels like there's a block right from the beginning when I chat with girls. Even girls here on the res. Now it was my turn to laugh. Yeah, I get that. It sounds bad, but it can get a little hard to interact with the normal populace. Sometimes in my head I think of them as normies. I got that from Mike's older brother. He plays water polo at UCLA, and he mentioned his team calls the non-athletes at school normies. Jake laughed, and I blushed a bit. Don't tell anyone I said that. I shook my finger at him in warning. It's a terrible thing to say. I know it sounds incredibly elitist, but they're just, like, living in a different world. Yeah, an easier world. Sometimes, I would kill to be in that world, Jake said wistfully. Maybe I should date a normie, though. I'd be nice to pretend sometimes. Yeah, but that's the problem. It feels like pretending the whole time, I said thoughtfully. Can you really start friendship with lies? Or a relationship? My stomach churned as I thought once of about Edward's lies. Eager for a distraction, I asked Jake if I could do more to help with the bike. Working side by side helped the awkwardness from the dating talk dissipate soon. It was back to a silence between us that was only filled by Jake's occasional requests for me to hand him a tool or part an explanation about what he was doing. It felt easy. Easy. If I wanted, I could choose easy. Shouldn't a relationship be easy? Watching his strong, tan arms work on the delicate pieces of the bike, I couldn't ignore the feeling of warmth that spread through my body. Warmth again. It reminded me of how I used to think of him as my personal son. I had a choice. A few more mysterious tools and complex explanations later, Jake stood to start the bike, and asked me to read the number on the carb balancer, which was resting on the ground, to him. He roared the bike to life, and I leaned in to read the dial. It's about 9, sigh, I shouted over the roar of the idling bike, but it's dancing between 8 and 10. What? He shouted back. I said the gauge is not completely stopped. Dotly I trailed off as I realized he had shut off the bike halfway through my sentence, leaving me shouting over nothing. Suddenly the garage seemed eerily silent. We were frozen for a moment. I realized that since I'd leaned in to read the gauge, my face was now inches from his thigh. Slowly, as if we were both trying not to startle each other, he leaned himself against the seat of the bike, and I stood up. Bells, he whispered. Do you ever wonder? I slid my fingers to his forearm. He looked down at my hand. I couldn't tell if he was surprised. I leaned in closer, and Jake raised his gaze to meet mine. His eyes were a gentle, russet brown. Curiosity overtook me, pulled me, dragged me closer and closer to his lips. They looked so warm and soft, and it was so easy. I had to know. I leaned in to close the small gap, and our lips connected. Anne, stick with me, but as always, welcome advice, input, hate, encouragement, etc. Jake's lips were so warm, and he smelled so good. Without thinking, my right hand was moving up to cup his neck. For a moment I braced myself for him to pull back. I realized dimly that was a reflex trained in me from Edward's reticence in my previous kisses. The thought of previous kisses distracted me for a split second, but I didn't let myself dwell on the past. Instead, I focused my full thoughts on the revelation that Jake wouldn't have to pull back. Jake didn't have to worry about hurting me, and that meant I didn't have to brace myself against this growing feeling of desire. I let my tongue sneak out to find his. The inside of his lips was still cool and sweet from the soda he'd been drinking, and the distinct taste of the Coke mingled with the pizza and something else, the taste of him. Jake lifted his hand to my arm, and I felt the heat of 1,000 suns spreading out from that point. Experimentally, I allowed myself to lean in, to press my right leg in the space between his thighs. Anticipation built as my hips closed the final distance to rest against his. But at the moment my jeans pressed against his, I felt us both stiffen. I stepped back quickly, my heart sinking as I wondered what damage I might have done. Jake, I began, but he held up a hand to stop me. Hold on, he said. His eyes were still closed from the kiss. I need a second to just. Give me a second. I waited, sorting through my own feelings. I counted at least 15 breaths before he opened his own eyes. We both opened our mouths to speak at the same moment, and then gestured to the other awkwardly. You first, I whispered. Jacob pursed his lips and sucked in air. His words came out in a rush. Bells, you're beautiful. But I gotta be honest, that felt like kissing my sister. I felt my whole body relax. Oh, thank God. I was worried it was just me. A wide grin spread across his face. No, definitely not. I mean, the kiss was fine, but, when you leaned in, his face pulled into a grimace. Yes, I exclaimed, moving to the other side of the bike, away from him. It was so weird. I made the same wincing face, and I couldn't help but laugh. He joined in. Oh man, he said. I feel so stupid. I mean, I'm glad we tried, obviously. I had been wondering. These past few days I would have kept wondering, but now we know. You make it sound like a school lesson, I joked. I put on a shrill voice like I was imitating my least favorite teacher. What did we learn today, class? He answered in a deep, mock-chastised voice. We learned that we should never kiss our sisters, no matter how pretty we think they are. I laughed again, buoyed by my newfound revelation. It felt like a huge existential question had been lifted from my shoulders. But then I remembered my other existential question. Where was Edward now? What was he doing? Could I trust him not to come on the reservation? Was he running away? Waiting by the phone for me to call? Waiting for my choice? My choice? Oh, fuck. Edward, I said, looking up at Jake with panic in my eyes. What the hell am I going to tell Edward? I'd not only run away from Edward, I'd run into the arms of someone else. Temporarily, of course. But still, how was Edward going to react when he found out I'd kissed Jacob? Jake winced. I don't know, but I'm going to stay safely on the res when you do. Oh my God, I'm a cheater, I said, the realization dawning on me. Oh my God, fuck. I had to fight the urge to vomit. I felt disgusted. The deepest shame spread through me. But next to it, just the smallest bloom, was a tiny bit of satisfaction. With shock, I realized a small part of me wanted to hurt him. I was the monster. Why was this so goddamn hard? I didn't know how to trust Edward again. And here I was, making myself into someone who he couldn't trust. He hurts me. I hurt him. Our love had always felt so right. So why did it have to be so hard? I turned away from Jake and kicked the first thing I saw, an empty paint can from when Jake and I had repainted the barn. Ugh, I found myself screaming as I kicked. Fuck, my hands balled up. My vision tightened to a pinhole, the rest out of focus, as I looked for an outlet for my rage. I kicked the can again. Ah, whoa, Bella. Jake came up to me and gripped my wrists with both hands. I tried to brush him off, but he held on. Jesus, Bella, what's gotten into you? He ducked his head and bent down to force me to look in his eyes. I thought I saw some fear there. What was he afraid of? Surely not of me. I don't know, I shouted, torn between wanting to cry and wanting to kick some more things. I don't know, I feel like I don't recognize myself. I'm so mad. What is this? I never felt this way during that time. I swallowed. Jake kept his hands gripping each shoulder, stopping me from turning or walking away. He chewed his bottom lip before nodding. When Sarah, my mom, when she died, he started. That surprised me. Jake never spoke about his mom. I looked up, but he was staring at something behind me. When she died, I felt really angry. It was confusing, because I knew anger probably wasn't the right response, but I felt like a different person. I didn't recognize myself. I couldn't control it, but I had to put my anger somewhere. It was like my body didn't know what to do with the grief, so it was forcing it out as anger, as hatred. Grief. That struck a chord. Was that what this was? No one had died, but I did feel like I had lost something or someone. My old self? The old Edward? The trust between us? Something was gone. I nodded slowly and cleared my throat. What did you do? I asked. My voice sounded shaky. Jake broke into a grin, although his eyes still looked sad. Come on, let me show you. Hua, I shouted as I hurled what was probably my 40th clay clump against the cliff. It didn't dislodge much from the cliff, but the clump I had thrown exploded into 1,000 little pieces. Beside me, Jake's long arm whipped forward. The impact of his weapon was even more explosive, sending a mini avalanche of clay and mud careening down the small face. We were standing on the rocky beach, facing a cliff maybe 6 times as high as Jake. Jake had told me the cliff separating this stretch of the beach from the forest was made of clay, which meant any chunks we picked up and any spots we hurled them at were soft and easily broken. A healthy place to channel your anger, he had promised, and it was. I had worried that if anyone walked up we would look crazy, but Jake promised that small kids did this all time. Not the adults so much, he conceded with a broad grin. So we'll look a little crazy to any of them. But there are rarely any people this far from the parking areas anyway. At first I threw without thinking, just getting my emotion out. But after a dozen or so wild tosses, I found that the exercise gave an outlet for my emotions that let my brain work quietly without interruption. Did I have a choice with Edward at all? Part of me thought I didn't feel anything with Jake because I didn't have a choice. My fate was sealed. I would never love anyone like I loved Edward. We were bound together. Part of me was overjoyed by this confirmation. Of course I didn't want to be separated from Edward. Wasn't that what the whole last year had been about? I wanted him more than anything. This whole afternoon, I'd been fighting the urge to go back and pretend nothing was wrong, just so I could look into his eyes and feel his arms around me, and kiss his lips, and feel that everything was right. But those same lips that kissed me so tenderly had lied to me over and over. And so another part of me, the motorcycle riding, self-determined part that had grown up during our time apart, was livid at the idea of having yet another choice taken from me, of falling back into the arms of a man who seemed determined to take all my choices from me. I could see only 2 paths ahead of us. He got his way and never changed me, or I got myself changed and spent an eternity with someone who found it acceptable to lie to me and decide what was best on my behalf. And so my thoughts spiraled. But as I made throw after throw, my anger dissipated. The jagged edges of my thoughts smoothed and took on a shiny edge, and my breathing evened out. I was turning over my options in my head, planning how I would take the rest of the weekend for myself, and then go back to Edward, explain the kiss, beg for his forgiveness, and insist that we would tell each other the truth from now on, that we would trust each other, and beg for him to change me. Yes, maybe that would fix things if we could just be on even footing, playing on the same field. But the sneaky voice in my head came creeping back. Would Edward really treat me differently as a vampire? Or would we forever using his compass? Bella? Jake's voice was casual, almost too casual. Yeah, I said. Do you want to talk about it? Jake ventured. Did I? Maybe. But this was the problem with having a vampire-human relationship. I never felt like anyone I was talking to actually had the context to understand. I was silent, and Jake didn't press it. Minutes passed, the only sounds the slowing cadence of our missiles lobbed against the dirt, and the uneven roll of the waves on the beach. That's okay, but I have something I need to talk about, Jake said eventually. I nodded, bracing myself for a lecture about how my vampire boyfriend was bad for me. Everyone loved to lecture me about the dangers in my life. I didn't turn to look at him, just continued searching for a larger clump of clay, maybe one with some rocks in it. I'm really sorry for how I reacted when you came back from Italy, Jake said. I looked up, surprised, but Jake was searching the beach for something. Head bowed and shoulders tight. Not just bringing the bike to Charlie, but ignoring your calls for weeks after. I've been thinking about it for the last few weeks. But after your calls stopped and you didn't come, I realized I'd been wrong to brush you aside, but I wasn't sure how to reach back out. I didn't know if you'd want me to. And I didn't know. Jake's voice caught, and I heard anger seep in. I didn't know how he would react. I wasn't sure when I could come around. You could have called. I said, as though we were talking about practical options for how to approach a homework problem. Whack went the missile, as I lobbed it at the bank with all my strength. It was my first throw where the destruction it caused felt pitiful, small compared to the throws Jake had sent. I turned. Jake had his eyebrow raised. Would a phone call really have been the right way to talk about this? I guess not, I admitted. I thought about why I hadn't been out here. At first it was because Jake was ignoring my calls. And then, when I decided enough was enough and Jake couldn't ignore me forever and decided to come out here myself, Edward had intervened. I remembered the little black piece of metal Edward had twirled in his hands the first night I decided to come out here, ripped from my truck to stop me from driving it. It's too dangerous, he'd insisted. I can't let you go. I shook myself out of the memory. I was here now. Jake was speaking. I should listen. Yeah, well, now's my chance. I owe you an apology, Bells. I was so mad that he basically broke you, and then you took him back like that. Jake illustrated with a snap of his fingers. I opened my mouth, driven by an instinct to defend, but he held up his hand. Let me finish. I was mad, and I still don't understand that. But I also realize now that getting mad at you was not the way to support you. All it did was make you feel like you had to choose. I closed my mouth, surprised. Jake continued, and I was also angry. I am angry that you still want to be a vampire. I don't understand it. It makes me feel sick to my stomach when I think about you cold with those teeth. Jake shivered, staring out at the rocks abutting from the calm ocean. I was only staring at him, but then I realized, again, if I do believe that it's the wrong decision, or if I'm so shocked that you're thinking about going through with it, then you need a friend more than ever. And as much as I want to get angry and make you see it from my perspective, all that will do is push you further towards that future. You deserve someone in your corner, Bells, Jake said, finally turning to look at me. His expression was tender, but I also saw resignation and sadness. And I also realized I just like you too much to waste whatever times we could hang out before you know. Like when someone has a terminal diagnosis, you don't push them away during their final years. It was an earnest apology, and I could see the shift in his attitude. Gone was the anger and darkness that had been so close to the surface when he'd first faced. I forgive you, I said, and I meant it. Besides, I continued, his ominous words on his perception of my impending doom demanding a response. It wouldn't be like that, Jake. I wouldn't be dead. I said the words, but I barely cared about them. It was hard to focus on or care about the vampire future part of our discussion. Given my choice to fight with Edward, had put up yet another roadblock between me and becoming a vampire. Jake braced his shoulders again. It would feel that way for me. I'm sorry, but I don't. There's a lot I can accept, but I don't think I could accept that. Please don't ask me to. Bells, he said. The pain in his eyes made my own eyes sting with the beginnings of tears, and I forced myself to swallow. But you're still in my corner, even if that's where I'm heading? I asked. Jake sucked in a breath, clenching his hands at his side. Human Bella, even if she's hanging out with the vamps, I'm always in her corner. Whatever she needs me for, as long as she's human, she's my best friend. I can't promise I won't push for her to stay human, maybe just point out some of the things you're missing. But I'll be in her corner, your corner, however she needs me. I'm going to be a better friend. Jake said it like a vow, squaring his shoulders and meeting my eyes. Guilt hit me at his declaration, and the implication that he had been a poor friend. I didn't deserve Jake. All I had done was take from him, until there was nothing left. I opened my mouth to thank him, but what came out instead surprised me. Why are you friends with me? I asked. Jake stiffened at the words. What do you mean? He asked cautiously. I realized he was expecting a rejection, and I laughed bitterly. Our whole friendship has been about what Bella needs. Bella is sad. Weak Bella needs protection. Pathetic Bella needs cheering up. I don't ask you about yourself or do anything for you. I've never been a good friend to you. Jake bent his knees, bringing our eyes to nearly the same height. I felt like a child whose parent was coming down to their eye level. I expected gentle encouragement and soft reassurances the way Edward so often managed these moods of mine, and I prepared my words to dismiss them. But Jake was nothing like Edward. Don't you dare talk about yourself that way. Jake's commanding voice reminded me of when I'd heard Sam give a pack command, and it scared me a little. I started back, but he put one hand on my shoulder. You have been an amazing friend to me. When we first became friends, would you agree you were in the lowest place of your life? Jake asked, tone still steely. I swallowed and nodded. That was an understatement. Jake returned my nod and continued. You could barely talk about yourself or care for yourself. And yet when you came here, you treated me like your younger brother, asking question after question. focusing all your energy on my life and my problems. You even encouraged me to get more serious about school and what I was studying. You encouraged me to talk about my friends, Sam, and other things that were weighing on me, anything. No one had talked to me like that since my mom Billy and Quill and Emery. None of the men in my life really asked questions like that. You taught me how to think through my feelings and problems. I saw what an effort just existing was for you at that time. Yet you never made me feel that being friends with me was any effort at all. And then when I transformed and you wouldn't let me push you away, Bella, that's real friendship. You stood by me, connected me to who I was before. You are the only person outside the tribe who knows my deepest secret. Jake's earnestness washed over me, and I found myself genuinely touched by his words. I could even see some truth to them, because I felt the same way about Jake's friendship. We were back to back, against the world, always understanding each other so easily, like family. That was selfish, though. I wanted someone to fix the bikes, and then I wanted friendship. Just someone happy to distract me. I can't imagine I was any fun to hang out with during that time. Jake shook his head. Yeah, you're right. I must have been torturing myself for months for no reason. I blanched, breaking eye contact. Jake shifted around me so he was back in my line of sight. Bella, he laughed, looking incredulous. Is that what you really worry about? That you're not what, fun? I blanched. Ding ding ding. In a world of beautiful vampires and powerful werewolves who had literal superpowers, I was just Bella. You're joking, Jake said. There was genuine mirth in his eyes, like this idea was hilarious to him. It's hard to measure up when you're the only human, I admitted. Everyone else has a passion, a duty, a talent, I shrugged. You have passions, you're fun, Jake said. I just told you, you're a really passionate friend. My most loyal friend. I raised an eyebrow at that. I'm fun because I know the power of friendship. Really, Jake? I rolled my eyes. Jake laughed, but I appreciated that he seemed to be taking this at least semi-seriously, instead of brushing aside my concerns like Alice and Edward so often did. Okay, but you have hobbies. You ride motorcycles, that's pretty badass. And you had that hiking project we worked on. We hiked every weekend for that. That was a fun project, and that was your own. I sucked in a breath. It wasn't rational to feel hurt. Jake was being earnest. He didn't know those weren't my hobbies. They had both been all about Edward, part of my campaign to see visions of him. But I couldn't bring myself to tell Jake that. Not when they had been part of the basis of our friendship. Besides, even if it was true that I loved riding the bike now, even without hallucination Edward as a motivation, it didn't matter. The hiking project was a one-time thing, not really a hobby. And Charlie would kill me if I rode the bike, I replied. Not to mention how Edward would react. Cooking. You like to cook, right? You're a great cook, and you make dinner almost every night. Jake looked so proud at the rebuttal, almost victorious. His words only made my heart sink lower, though, because I do that for Charlie, I confessed. I just like to cook because I like to make sure he's taken care of. It was the same with Renee. If it was just me, I'd be happy with a grilled cheese or a salad every night. Jake blinked at that, looking a bit surprised. He furrowed his brow in concentration. I stared idly at the waves, which were calming now as the night grew later. I should probably call Charlie soon. He had softened the grounding recently, but I was still pretty sure he wouldn't take kindly to coming home and not knowing where I was. Oh, reading, Jake declared, his tone identical to one who had just shouted Eureka. You love to read, don't you, Bells? That was true. I had always loved reading. But what was the last new book I had read? I thought back, it was for English class. The Catcher in the Rye. I hadn't exactly been drawn in by Holden Caulfield. I thought back further, every new book I could recall reading, since moving to Forks, was for school. And thanks to the lagging curriculum of Forks High, even most of our assigned reading were books I'd already read in my classes in Phoenix. Everything else I'd read recently was a reread, drawn either from the limited selection of the Forks library or my own battered collection of well-loved books. The only book I'd added to the collection since moving was one on vampire myths that I'd bought that night in Port Angeles when Edward. Bells? Jake prompted. Yeah, I replied quietly, forcing a slight smile to my face. You're right, I like to read. Jake nodded, but I saw some of my own sadness mirrored in his empathetic eyes. He was worried about me. I should put on a brave face. How about you? I nudged. What are your favorite things to do? Oh, you know that, Jake said practically. Fixing the cars and bikes. Actually, I've been meaning to tell you. I've picked up some work thanks to you. Thanks to me? I asked, surprised. Yeah, one of your friends Ben is friends with a cousin of mine on the res. Apparently they were hanging out, and Ben mentioned he'd heard from you that your friend Jake out here was good with cars. Ben said his dad told him to change his oil. but he didn't know how, and my cousin gave Ben my number. Ben offered me $20 to show him how to change his oil. Easiest 20 I've ever made. You taught Ben Chaney how to change his oil? I sputtered, straining to imagine wiry Ben and Big Jacob bent over Ben's old Saab together. Yeah, Jake laughed. I felt bad for the kid, if his dad was making him do it, but never even showed him how. I didn't want to take his money, but he insisted. And he's sent a few more of your classmates my way since then. Whoa, how have I not heard about this? I wondered. I felt mystified that I had missed this, and also a surprising pang of jealousy. Jake may bemoan not having a partner, but he had a pack of brothers and an understanding community purpose in his role as a wolf. Not to mention literal superpowers and a passion and talent for building cars. I could easily see that the story Jake had just told was the beginning of a future career and business built on his passion. In comparison, I had Charlie, Jake, and Edward and his family, the last of which I had pushed away just this afternoon. I had nothing just for me. Do you hang out much with your human classmates? Jake asked pointedly. I started thinking he'd been answering my thoughts, but then realized he was merely answering the question I'd already forgotten asking. How have I not heard about this? I opened my mouth to defend myself, but closed it when I realized I had no retort. Shame crept through me. I really was a terrible friend. No, I know that look. Don't feel bad. It's like you said, they're normies. It's hard when you have to lie to them. Don't feel bad for not knowing or hanging with them more. So long as you're hanging with people, and you're doing okay, you're fine. And like we said, you have your books, Jake teased. I nodded, but there was still a bruise where his words had accidentally landed. I thought again of the small stack of dog-eared books on the side of my bed. I wondered, if I continued to push away Edward, was Charlie, and that well-worn stack of books all I had to go home to? I called Charlie the second we got back to Jake's, my head thankfully far clearer than it had been when I had arrived. He picked up on the second ring. I paused for a moment, wondering if Edward was listening somewhere in the background, without Charlie's and my knowledge. There was nothing I could do about it if he was. I told Charlie where I was, bracing for retribution. Given my recent mostly lifting of being grounded, it turned out I had nothing to worry about. Charlie practically preened with encouragement when I mentioned Jake's name, and at the mention of staying the night to get some time with friends at La Push. That's great, Bells, Charlie effused. That's great that you're getting out of here and expanding. Yeah, of course, you should stay the night. No need to stress about coming back too late. And then you'll have all tomorrow to hang on the beach. You're about to graduate. You should be enjoying yourself. I'll be out fishing with Billy tomorrow anyway. If we catch something, maybe we can all eat it together. An instinctual part of my left to be defensive on Edward's behalf, knowing it was desire for me to expand my circle beyond him, that drove Charlie's support. I quashed the hypocritical urge and merely thanked Charlie before I hung up. Though Charlie hit me with a brick of paternal supervision. On the couch, right? He asked. You're staying on the couch? I couldn't even contain my groan of embarrassment. Yes, of course, Dad. They have pull-out couch. My eye roll was practically audible through the phone. Damn, I thought, cringing again at the thought of the possibility of Edward listening to this. After I hung up, my fingers lingered on the phone, hovering over the little 3 that would begin the phone number for the Cullen landline. I was out on the porch, thanks to the Black's new wireless landline. I didn't know how good Jake's werewolf hearing was when he was in his human body, but maybe he couldn't hear me from his place on the couch. Even if he could, what did it matter? I wasn't his anyway, I thought to myself. I was Edward's. I should probably call him. The heavy weight of that unconscious thought slammed into me. I was Edward's? Where did that come from? No, I damn well was not. I was not anyone's. And this wasn't like when Edward left me. He knew exactly where I was, and that I was safe at La Push, and when I'd be back, and that I still loved him. I swallowed a bit at the last thought, but it was true. I hadn't told him he was no good for me. I had merely said I needed a little space. He knew I would be back at school on Monday. Waiting won't kill him, I thought. I smiled bitterly at the accidental joke. I resolved to put the phone back before I could change my mind. I jumped to my feet and hurried back indoors, crossing the tiny kitchen to return the phone to its cradle with a few quick steps. It was all I could do not to slam it down. As I turned back to the living room part of the space, where Jake and Billy were watching TV, I realized I was not the only one frustrated. Billy's expression was intense, Jake's jaw set as he stared at the TV. A lingering tension rolled through the room from whatever conversation I seemed to have interrupted. Right, well, I'm off to bed. Early morning fishing with Charlie, Billy declared as he wheeled himself away from the couch. Bella, we've pulled out the spare sheets. Jake can help you make the bed. He gestured at the linen stacked on the small chair in the corner of the combined living room kitchen. I think Rachel or Rebecca still have some clothes somewhere. Jake can help you find some pajamas." I thanked him, and Billy gave Jake an awkward sitting hug over the back of the couch, and then rolled himself to the hallway that led to the bathroom and small bedrooms. The hall was just wide enough for his chair. Billy paused there a moment and looked over his shoulder to me. "Bella, at the risk of sounding too much like a dad, I'm glad you're here. I want you to know you're welcome anytime." Billy's tone was calm and confident, and he did not break eye contact. A wave of unexpected emotion radiated through me. I blinked. "Thank you, Billy." I blinked again at the sting that was pricking my eyes. Billy nodded and rolled away, and I turned back to Jake, who was watching me with a thoughtful expression. "Get up, big guy. You're on my bed," I said, reaching down from where I stood behind the couch to playfully push Jake's shoulders off the back of the couch and push him off it. My shove did nothing. He may as well have been a boulder. Jake's thoughtful gaze quickly became a smirk, and he laughed as he jumped up and moved to pull off the cushions. He passed the worn fabric cushions to me one by one for me to stack behind the couch. "So, Bells," Jake began. I groaned internally. I recognized that too casual. I asked casually, moving to the corner where they'd stacked the linen. "Bells," Jake said more softly. I didn't turn around, instead reaching for one of the thin pillows and its matching pillowcase. "What did he do? Did he leave again?" Jake's voice was tight with emotion. I heard worry and controlled anger. I kept my eyes on the pillow I was wrestling into its case. "No," I said. "I did." I didn't turn around to bother seeing Jake's reaction to that. After a moment, I heard the rusty groan of Jake lifting the pull-out bed from the couch. "I didn't really leave him," I corrected myself. "I'm going to go back. I can't not go back. He's all I have," and I swallowed. "And I love him." God, the biggest understatement imaginable. But I wasn't about to make Jake gag by saying what I was really thinking. He's my soulmate. He's my fate. He's my everything. I searched for words that would be true without getting into the lie I had discovered. I didn't want to tell Jake that I had learned my boyfriend had been lying to me for months. I didn't want his judgment. I didn't need a third person in my relationship. But I knew I owed him some information. It's not so easy to fit us back together after what he did. I needed some time to forgive him, I guess, I said, reaching for the other pillow, pulling my bottom lip between my teeth as I worried. "There's more, isn't there?" Jake prompted. "You can tell me." He moved next to me and reached around me for the fitted sheet, then turned around to begin stretching it around the mattress. I turned to help. "Jake, I think maybe this is everything you need to know." Jake's eyes snapped up at that, his expression one of unmistakable hurt. I held up my hands. "Think about it, Jake. Do you really want to be involved in this? To be dragged in between this human-vampire relationship? Is that really what is good for you? Or me? 2 in a relationship is enough, Jake. I've already dragged you into this where I shouldn't have. I don't need an arbiter of my relationship. I just need a friend. I need you to be my brother Jacob, not my relationship counselor." Jake opened his mouth, and I could see from his reluctance that he was going to pry again. His instinct to protect me was too strong, too well-honed after months of him seeing me at my weakest. "Did you mean it today, about being in human Bella's corner?" I asked. If the seeming non sequitur surprised him, he didn't show it. "Yes, of course," he said simply. "This is like that," I replied. "I don't need you involved on the vampire side of things. I just need you backing up human Bella. I need you in her corner, not in the ring between me and the vamps." I swallowed. The truth was, I wasn't sure how I felt about human Bella, or what I was asking Jake for here. But I at least knew this redirection would get his focus off my vampire relationships, and maybe it would let me keep a slice of the friendship we had built over the last few months. A broad grin spread over Jake's expression, wider than I expected. I realized with a start how my metaphor might have sounded like I was fighting the vampires. "Oh, man, not what I had meant." "You got it," Jake said, straightening to his full massive height. Team Human Bella assembled. The next morning was quiet. I was dimly aware of the sounds of Billy rolling out of the house while it was still dark, but fell back asleep easily. Still, it seemed I was awake well before Jake, and helped myself guiltily to some cereal, feeling like a thief as I raided their kitchen. I promised myself I'd bring some baked goods next time as a thank you. After I ate, I grabbed my school backpack and rummaged around. I had a pair of emergency spare underwear in my little period supplies bag, which would make changing back into my clothes from yesterday more bearable. Still, as I used the Black's toothpaste to brush my teeth with my finger, my unplanned flight felt a little childish. As I walked back to the kitchen area, I paused for a moment outside Jake's room. The door was fit poorly, leaving a small slit there which I could just make out a sprawling body completely covering a too-small bed. My next search through the backpack was for a distraction. I winced when I saw the little plastic folder of college applications that Edward and I had been working through. I had been working on applications to schools that accepted late submissions to appease him and Charlie, but none of them really appealed to me. The whole exercise had felt moot anyway. My plan was to be a vampire by the time the school year came around. A pang of anxiety twisted in my stomach. I had just weeks till graduation, and I had no clue what my plan was next. I reached for my physics homework instead, letting Ohm's law that I barely understood distract me. Around 11 a.m. I started to get a bit worried that Jake might actually be dead in his room. But just as I was debating rousing him, I heard the creak of bed springs and a tired groan as he eased the door open. "Morning, sleepyhead," I teased. "You're the stereotype of the lazy teenager." Jake laughed, his throat still thick and rough with sleep. "Not lazy," he said tiredly. "Was on patrol from midnight to 4. I stilled. "What?" I said. "Why didn't you say something?" Jake shrugged. "We always run patrol," he said casually, reaching for the toast that had just popped out of the toaster. That was true, I knew, but I wondered. "Victoria?" I asked. "Have you seen her recently? Or are you worried that, with me here, she'll come?" Fresh guilt and fear bloomed through me. "Hey, Bella, calm down," Jake said, eyes wide as he took in the beginnings of my panic. "None of us have smelled freaky redeed recently. We always run patrol. It's our job to protect La Push, remember?" There was something about his too casual tone, though. "Swear you'll tell me." "What?" Jake asked around a mouthful of toast. "Swear you'll tell me if you do see any trace of her. Swear you won't lie to me to protect me." My voice wavered with emotion, but it was loud and forceful in the small kitchen. "I wouldn't accept more lies." Sure, fine, that's fair enough," said Jake, looking mystified. He turned back to the second piece of toast and began slathering an ungodly amount of peanut butter on it. I let out a deep breath of air. My anxiety was pushed back by a new emotion. Was it pride? It had been such a simple thing to tell Jake what I needed. He had agreed easily. I had spoken up. I felt a little surprised and pleased with myself. I returned to my homework while Jake wolfed down what seemed to be half a loaf of bread. He flopped on the couch, and we sat in the little room in comfortable silence until Billy returned. Billy came by around noon accompanied by Charlie and by 2 big fish, which they proudly displayed, seeming to expect Jake and I to ooh and ah over their catch. I did not oblige, but I did offer to fry them up if Charlie cleaned and cut them for me. Jake found some frozen French fries buried in the freezer, and Billy made a tartar sauce. Soon, we were all gathered around the little table, scarfing down fish and chips. Jake ate as much as the rest of us combined, which impressed me given I'd watched him eat half a loaf of bread with a jar of peanut butter for breakfast. Lunch was nice, easy. Charlie and I were quiet, so Billy and Jake filled most of the conversation, telling easy jokes and stories. It took a surprisingly long time to clean up the tiny kitchen, but eventually we had it reset. Charlie departed promising me it didn't matter if I came back this evening or tomorrow afternoon, so long as you get your homework done, he added solemnly, but I could tell it was an afterthought. My teenage instincts rebelled a bit at knowing I was doing exactly what my over-involved dad seemed to want, but I couldn't deny that I may not be ready to leave La Push yet. It was childish and avoidant of me, but while I was here, I didn't have to think about rebuilding with Edward. I knew as soon as I went back, as soon as I saw him, I would forgive him. It was inevitable, surely. It was like he had said about himself after Italy. I wasn't strong enough to stay away. The clouds parted just after lunch, and Jake suggested another walk on the beach. We moved slowly, Jake watching the ground for large clamshells that he could send flying high over the waves, so they seemed to hover. He tried to show me how to do it, but I couldn't get the speed required. On my 5th failed attempt, I turned to see Jake watching me thoughtfully. "What?" I asked. "You're a really terrible throw," Jake replied frankly. "Oh, no, I had no idea. Here I thought I might one day have a career with the Mariners." Jake snorted, but continued to watch me. "What are you going to do when you go back?" he asked. I stiffened. "Not my counselor, Jake," I reminded him. He held up his hands. "Fine, fair enough," he said. "But I actually meant, you're graduating school soon, right? Have you decided what you're doing next?" I rolled my eyes. "The future talk, really, Jake? That's not like you." He laughed again. "No, you're right. But I was thinking while I was on patrol last night, lots of time to kill when you're just running in circles in the woods," he said solemnly. "I was thinking more about what we said, about being on your team. I have an idea." "Bella!" came a shout down the beach, interrupting Jake. I whipped my head around quickly, heart stuttering, instinctually turning and flinching. Relax, Bells, it's just Quill and Embry, Jake said with a soft chuckle. His tone was gentle, but he looked surprised at how startled I'd been. I nodded and lowered my hands, managing a weak laugh at my overreaction. Bella, Quill called when he was closer. Good to see you back here. Thought for a while your bloodsucker was keeping you hostage. Yeah, Jake started planning a rescue mission and everything, Emery laughed. I laughed at the joke, but when looked to Jake, he winced. I wasn't sure if they were joking or not. And the truth was, I had run away from Edward. Did that make me his hostage? Surely not before I had to reply, though, Quill continued. Come on up to Emily's house, there's something you'll want to see, Quill said with a smile. Oh, guys, I don't know if I'm in the mood for the big group today, I replied. Jake and Emery shared a smirk. No, they're right. Emily will kill us if she knew you were here and didn't go see her. It won't take long even accounting for your snail pace. Jake laughed, and I playfully punched him in the shoulder. Fine, lead the way, I agreed. We walked up the beach and cut only a winding path. That apparently was a shortcut to the little cottage. The boys ribbed each other on the way up, Jake taking the brunt of their jokes, but dishing them back easily. As usual, I was quiet, but I appreciated basking in the obvious warmth between their easy friendship. 20 minutes later, we were bursting into the little cabin. Sam was lounging at the dining room table in the over-trumped kitchen and looked up, surprise coloring his features when he noticed me. Emily was standing by the fridge door, apparently rustling around its contents. Emily, Quill called. We brought you a present. Emily stood up behind the open fridge door. Bella, she cried, I'm so happy you're here. We were starting to wonder if you'd forgotten us. A pang of guilt ran through me, but I didn't have to force my answering smile at her genuine enthusiasm at seeing me. I've been really busy with school, not that Jake and Embry would get that. Truants, I quipped, playfully punching Embry on the shoulder. It was like punching a mound of earth. Emily's light laugh and Sam's deep chuckle filled the cabin. It felt as warm and cozy as I remembered. Well, I heard you have a surprise for me, I prompted. What is it? Emily smiled as she closed the fridge door. Despite the long scar, she looked beautiful. Her twisted smile was white as she reached around the door and plucked a small black square off the front of it. She handed it to Sam and motioned for him to pass it to me. My jaw dropped when I saw what it was. Holy shit, I exclaimed. Jake erupted in laughter, but I continued to stare at the little black square, because it had a tiny little white human-shaped smudge in it, and when I looked up, Emily had tucked her loose dress around her, and I could make out a subtle but clear bump. Holy shit, I repeated. Congratulations. Without thinking, I rushed over to hug Sam, and, more gently, Emily. Sam seemed startled, but returned my hug easily. But how last time I saw you, you didn't have this, I said. Emily laughed. Yeah, I was almost at 12 weeks when Emily trailed off awkwardly, and I knew she didn't know how to address my run to Italy. I hadn't been back to the res since. Well, you can tell people around 12 weeks. So we hadn't really told anyone up till then, and now in the last 4 weeks the bump has just grown really quickly. It's crazy. Wow, that's incredible, really. Congrats, guys, I said, a bit awkwardly now, because I wasn't really sure what else to say. Luckily, the other boys took over then, clamoring for food, ribbing Sam about what kind of dad he'd be, and planning patrols. I was able to sit quietly, half listening and half absorbed in my thoughts. Emily and Sam had always seemed older than us, but I still thought of them as pseudo-peers. It made my mind reel to imagine a peer of mine having children. We were still children ourselves, right? It felt so permanent. The irony of the thought hit me in the head like a hammer. Wasn't I desperately trying to make an even more permanent decision, in wanting to be changed? No, I wouldn't let myself think of Edward now. I forced myself to clear my thoughts. I focused on the jokes being passed, the warmth passing between Emily and Sam, which permeated the whole kitchen and set us all smiling. Just as I was starting to relax, a bang at the door made me stiffen and yelp. Jake laughed, putting one hand on my shoulder in a reassuring pat, and as I registered it was just Jared at the door, I feebly attempted to laugh it off, like with the jump scare from Quill and Embry earlier. Fortunately, Sam redirected the group's attention to Jared. Report? He asked sharply. I realized then that Jared had a serious look to him. Everything's fine. Paul took over for the next shift, all good. But there was a scent we caught on our last pass. We barely noticed it. It was far enough on the other side of the border. I think we only caught it on our last pass, because the wind had shifted by then. So I'm not sure how long it was. Therefore Sam stood up quickly, and Jared held up his hand. No one crossed. It was well on the other side of the border. But I think just to be safe, another should go out for the night. And I was going to suggest we have Jake call Bella to ask about it. But, well, he gestured at me, as if to say, here she is. My eyes widened. Victoria, was it female? My white eyes moved quickly to Jake, who was also already on his feet. Or if it wasn't Victoria, I still hadn't told him anything about my own promise to the Volturi, or that they may come from me. Jared kept his gaze and answers directed to Sam, but shook his head in answer to my question. No, we recognize the scent. We know to raise the alarm immediately if it was a stranger. Really, I don't think it's anything to worry about. You know, Paul. We recognize the scent. That had to mean. Which one? Jake asked. Jared laughed darkly. She's here. Who do you think? Edward, I breathed. All eyes in the cabin swiveled to me. Jake pushed the chair between us out of the way and kneeled to meet me at eye level. Bella, Jake said. Do you know what's going on? Are the Cullens okay? Oh God, was I really going to get into this in front of everyone? This was so embarrassing. A tense silence filled the cabin while every member waited for me to speak. Edward and I fought. I whispered, looking down at Jake's hands, as I fought to keep my voice steady. I saw everyone stiffen, and I remembered that to them Edward was dangerous. I spoke quickly, realizing I needed to clarify. I was mad at him. He wasn't fighting with me, I swear. But I just started to feel like I needed some space and some friendship, I guess. So I came here. I told him I was coming here and I told him I'd be back, that I just needed a little space. Embry laughed. So you decided to use the reservation as your personal fortress? I couldn't tell if he sounded amused, annoyed, or impressed. Jake opened his mouth to retort, but it was Sam who spoke first. Bella, you are a friend to many of us. You are always welcome here, and this will always be a sanctuary from all vampires. I nodded my thanks, still focusing all my attention on Jake's hands in an effort not to begin crying. I saw Jake's head turn in the direction of Sam. They must have shared a look, because a moment later, Jake spoke softly to me. Bella, do you think that there's any risk the Cullens try to cross the border to come and get you? Jake asked. I gasped. Carlisle would never, but Edward by himself. I think about his rash reaction to Rosalie's phone call. If Edward is that desperate, I looked around the kitchen at Quill, Embry, and Jared's stern expressions. To them, Edward was still an enemy. If he tried to cross the border, it would lead to a fight. And I was sure Alice wouldn't be far behind. I have to go to the border, I said. The longer I'm here, the more anxious he'll get. I raised my eyes to meet Sam's. I'm so sorry. I did not think for a second that he would come looking for me. He knows I'm here willingly, and I don't think he'll come through, but we can't risk it. Jake gripped my wrists protectively. I was going to go back in a few hours. Anyway, I said to Jake. Jake looked at me cautiously, and probably trying to guess what happened between Edward and me, rather than ask about that in front of our audience. Though, he said carefully, are you sure it's safe for you to go back home? You can stay here as long as you want, you know. We can figure out an excuse for Charlie. I laughed. I'm not in danger, I swear. This wasn't that kind of running away. It's just a fight, couples have those, right? Jake looked uncertain, but I continued. I promise, it's probably nothing. He's probably not even at the border. And if he is, he won't cross. Once I'm back across, I'll cross the border and be back at home to call you within an hour. If I'm not back by then, you can start panicking. Got it? Fine. But if he hurts you, Jake reached his long arms around me, pulling me into a hug. It was awkward, with me still on the chair and him kneeling in front, but it felt so safe. Brotherly. After a moment, I stand and rush to the door to grab my shoes. The others start to plan. Jared and Embry, you join Paul at the border, Jake ordered. I started, and Jake directed his next words to me. Just in case, he amended. I'll get Bella back to grab her truck and then meet you there. Quill, you go back to my place and wait in case Bella calls early. Jake's eyes moved to Sam's, and Sam nodded with something like pride in his eyes. Good, Sam said. I was already at the door with both shoes on, lacing my shoelaces as fast as I could. As long as I don't hear the alarm, I'll phase in an hour to check in. I remembered Emily then, and I looked to her in the small doorway that led to their little bedroom. Her face looked tense and anxious. I'm so sorry to leave like this, I called to her, one foot already out the door. It was so good to see you, and I promise I won't wait so long till next time. Emily nodded and held her hands protectively over stomach. Next weekend, she replied. Promise you'll come visit us again next weekend, if you don't get here sooner. I don't want to worry about you. Without thinking about it, I nodded. Fine. Whatever it took to get moving quickly. Jake rushed us forward, bustling me out into the clearing and towards the path that led to Billy's house. I heard Emery and Jared heavy footsteps come out the door behind us and go the opposite direction, into the cover of the trees. A minute later I heard a wolf snarl from the spot they moved towards, and I suppressed a shudder of fear as I followed Jake, hoping all this was just for a false alarm. Thanks again for all the positive comments. I clearly am an egoist because I love to check for them. Due to some life stuff that's come up, I want to build in some extra space for myself on busy weeks. So I'll probably be updating either every week or every other week for a while, with every other as the worst case. I guarantee an upload every 2 weeks at minimum. We'll still aim for every other. If anyone knows how to schedule posts on FFN, please let me know, as that would make it much easier to post more regularly. Cheers, and hope you have a better day than E and B are having here. I tried and failed to coax more speed out of the truck, the engine groaning in protest under every gear change. Between deep breaths, I reassured myself there was no way Edward would be on the other side of the border. He was surely just checking that I hadn't crossed back across the border. He wouldn't be so stupid to be lurking nearby, or considering crossing the border. I swallowed back my fear. No, he'll be at Charlie's house, or at his own when I get to Charlie's and call him, I reassured myself. Still, I took some comfort knowing that Jake was running in the woods alongside me, at least up to the border. But as I crossed the gnarled tree that I knew marked the border on the road, I saw a blur on the road about ahead. Shit! I didn't let my foot off the pedal as I put distance between myself and the border, now behind me. I thought I remembered to pull out on the road ahead that I could use to pull off the road. There it was, a widened dirt strip on the side of the road about half a mile past the border. I pulled in, hoping at once that Ewood wouldn't be there. I yanked my keys out of the ignition, and practically fell out of the truck bed, frantically slamming the door as I searched the trees desperately for a sign of him. In a flash, he was there, standing between 2 trees about 20 feet back from the road. His features sagged in relief as he ran his gaze up and down, appraising me. I saw his lips move too far away for any sound to reach me, but I recognized my name in their movement. Bella, he mouthed. I stomped towards him, away from the road, anger blocking any rational thought. There was a small gap in the forest just where he was, not quite a clearing, but a space for us to talk. First, can they hear us here? I asked Edward. I didn't want an audience for this. He cocked his head as he listened. After a moment, he shook his head. I don't think so. I can just make out their thoughts back at the border, but it doesn't seem like they can hear us. I nodded, chewing on my lower lip. Edward looked wary. My normally shy nature warred with this new river of anger that found me, until... Were you about to cross the border? Are you kidding me? Tell me they were wrong. I erupted, throwing my hands in the air. It was impossible to imagine. Was Edward stupid? Bella, please, listen to me. Edward's tone was even, but I heard the undercurrent of emotion in his voice. I was going insane with worry. I can't control myself when I know you're at risk with the werewolves. Bella, just come here to me, please. I need to see you're okay. Edward's long arms reached out for me. I took a step back before they made contact with my shoulders. Surprise and hurt flicked across Edward's features. This is about the werewolves? Were you been listening to anything I said to you before I came out here? Seriously, had I been speaking gibberish? Yes, of course this is about the wolves. Edward spoke calmly, as if his position was the most rational in the world. Did you know Alice can't see you when you're with them? That brought me up short. But then that explained when I had jumped. Alice can't see them, and when you're with them, your whole future disappears. You have no clue the terror I've felt all weekend. I didn't know if you were alive or dead. Edward's eyes roamed over me frantically, as though seeking to reassure himself that I was healthy. That made me move past my initial surprise at the revelation of Alice's apparent selective blindness. Oh, please, I said, unable to contain an eye roll. Like I'm going to die at a campfire on the La Push Beach. I told you where I was going, and you know I'm safe here. Don't you remember? I was here for months, when you were away. The werewolves kept me safe. Edward winced, and I felt a stab of guilt. But I hadn't meant to trigger his guilt. The words had merely been the truth, offered in an attempt to protect the wolves who had protected me in kind. Edward took a steadying breath. Yes, I know better than anyone it's my fault that you have spent so much time on their territory throughout the last year. I will never forgive myself, and I'm grateful to them for protecting you. But I can't let you put yourself in more danger now, Bella, especially not on my account. I know I was wrong. I won't let myself make the same mistake twice. I won't leave you in danger. His tone was steel. His words seemed to wind through the air and lasso my chest like chains, squeezing me. The same mistake, Edward. What exactly do you think your mistake the first time around was? I asked, Bella, you have my word. I will never leave you in danger again. He said it like a vow, her eyes holding mine carefully. Danger? Is that seriously what you think this is about? You think I'm mad because you left me to face dangers myself? You think my time here was dangerous? My voice wasn't loud, but I could hear an edge to it. I wondered if he would be blind to that, too. Wasn't it? Laurent could have killed you, Bella. And when I think of what I've heard of Emily, he grimaced. Wow. I took another step back from him. His expression shifted. Was that confusion on his face? Bella, listen to me. He was as serious as I had ever heard him. I will spend every day regretting that I let my feelings get in the way of keeping you safe. I will never, ever let that happen again. I swear to you. He said each word slowly, deliberately, as if offering a prayer, or speaking to a child. I gave his words thought. Besides the fact that he was completely missing the months of gut-wrenching pain that his abrupt, unilateral departure had caused, that his breakup had caused, he was insulting the very people who had accepted me when I was at my most broken. I didn't want safety from him. I wanted him to understand. How could the man I loved so deeply misunderstand me so completely? But there was one thought that is begging for that's what it seemed he had turned to sparked in me. A glimmer of hope bloomed, despite the chains still wrapped in my chest. Maybe there was a way. You say you've decided to stop at nothing to protect me. Is that right? Edward's eyes widened, blooming with a touch of hope. He nodded earnestly. Anything, he vowed again. The hope in my chest grew, and my breath felt more even. Surely he would finally understand my position out of a willingness to protect me, if nothing else. Has that changed your opinion on changing me? I asked. My voice sounded so quiet. Please just say yes. I willed silently. Please just say yes. Please let me be like you. Please accept me. It won't matter then what you thought of human Bella. Take me, change me. Let us move past this. Edward inhaled sharply. Bella, he said, his tone turning my name into an admonishment. His hands were balled, sharp jaw tightened beneath his smooth skin. His lip curled back. He looked disgusted. Ice through my stomach. It was answer enough. The chains constricted again. Stupid hope. It gets you every time. I see. I felt for the ice growing within me, turning towards it to harden me and give me courage. Our position was untenable. I could see that now. As much as I loved Edward, I couldn't keep going as we had been, not with all the doubt I now felt. What would stop him from lying again, from leaving again? And he was showing me just what I needed to know, that he wasn't willing to see a problem, let alone to work with me to change it. I nodded at him. I understand, I said softly. He breathed a sigh of relief and stepped towards me. For the third time that evening, I stepped back. My first step backwards was slow, but I followed it quickly with two more. There were now at least 10 feet between us. Surprise flashed through him, followed by pain. His eyes widened, and his hand shot out to a nearby tree, as though he was searching for something to hold him upright. I might as well have stabbed him. Guilt coursed through my stomach, but I shoved it down. Bella? Edward whispered. It was getting dark around us now. The shadows thrown by the branches of the forest, lengthening into menacing, twisted shapes. I picked the shadow thrown by the largest tree and trained my eyes on it, but it was small distraction from the pain I knew I was about to cause him, and myself. But he at least deserved a real explanation. I didn't know when we'd talk next, and he deserved at least a chance to understand. I would give him more. I swallowed at the thought, more than he had given me last year. I wouldn't do to him what he had done to me. I shifted my gaze to his hand gripping the tree as I spoke, unable to tolerate more pain in his eyes. Was I in danger when you left? Yes, intense danger. More than you know. I wondered why I had chosen to say this. I was reminded of his gentle words when he'd returned. Did I feel guilty? Intensely so. More than you can comprehend. I shook my head, willing myself to focus on the present. I was in danger when you left, Edward, but not from Victoria or the wolves. From myself. From the aftermath of what you had done to me. We lay together in the meadow day after day and told each other our deepest secrets. And then you left me. And I could forgive that. I can forgive leaving. I have forgiven you. But you didn't just leave. You lied. And then you ran. You lied to me for months, all those months, and you never gave me a hint of what you were really thinking. And then, when Jasper attacked, a low groan came from his direction, and my throat stuck for a moment. But I continued on, gaze still intent on the shadow. When Jasper attacked, you didn't talk to me, did you? To my human ears, my words were a whisper, stifled by the wind rustling the tall evergreens. But I knew he could hear not only the words, but the heartbreak within them. I finally raised my eyes to meet his. His expression was unreadable, guarded. He was locking down, throwing up walls. "Classic," said the scathing, resentful voice in the back of my head. "Did you?" I asked again. My vision blurred slightly, and I blinked rapidly, hoping my tears would hold. "I'm here now, Bella, and I will never, ever leave you," Edward swore, his eyes fixed on the ground. I waited, but no more came. "I know you won't leave, but I deserve more than that. Partners are supposed to talk to each other, Edward. You could have talked to me anytime. You should have told me what you were really thinking. Maybe I could have helped. Maybe you wouldn't have almost died. Maybe then I wouldn't be being watched by the Volturi." I wasn't screaming, but my voice was loud and steeped in anger. Edward cringed away from me. Was he afraid of me? The ice in my chest began to melt. But no, he lied in our meadow, I thought. I thought about those empty months from October to January. And now he seemed to be making no effort to understand. It worked. The ice refroze, and as it had the night I sent him out of Charlie's house, I could almost feel the ice spread through my veins, giving me the strength to keep pushing. I held Edward's gaze and raised my chin defiantly, waiting for him to speak. His face was calm, but his eyes burned. His next words were a tortured plea. "Bella, tell me what you need. I'll do anything you ask. If this is over, I'll leave right now. If you want, I'll never come back. But if there's anything at all I can do to fix this, tell me. Tell me and I'll do it. Please, Bella." His voice choked on my name, and it came out strangled. That made me pause. I had expected the offer to leave running seemed to be his favorite option, and the back of my brain had already begun to marshal arguments against it. I had also expected him to be insistent that we could work through it, setting the course of our relationship being his other default. I hadn't expected begging. I hadn't expected him to lay the decision, at my feet. I had just wanted him to understand, not for him to beg. And I knew, of course I knew, that I couldn't send him away. As angry as I was, after the pain of last year, that was unthinkable. I didn't know what forward would look like for us, but if he would be willing to stay near, that was what I wanted. For all my anger, I still wanted him. I laughed at that. What a cruel joke, that even being angry at him hurt me. New pain flashed through his eyes. I wondered if he thought I was laughing at him. But before I could respond, he begged again. "Please, Bella." His eyes flicked across my face. I wondered what he saw. "Do you love me?" he whispered. "More than anything." I said it so quietly, the words barely reached my own ears. I expected him to sag in relief, or to use this to make an impassioned second plea, but he said nothing. The leaves around us rustled, and I found myself randomly wondering what sounds of the forest he could hear that I could not. "More than my own life," I repeated. "But I can't if we have forever. I can't do forever like this. I can't have you lying to me. Not that it even matters, because you won't even consider forever." I continued. I was speaking more to myself now, the words tumbling out as I processed aloud. "You won't even have me. So where does that leave us? You're leaving me no choices. You took away all my choices when you left, and you're still doing it. And you won't even talk to me about it." He was silent, but a strange, groaning noise reverberated around the trees. I glanced around before I realized the sound was coming from next to Edward. It was the tree, I realized. His hand was still braced on the tree, and it was groaning under the strain. I was unable to tear my gaze from his hand, but forced myself to carry on. "You are not my keeper, Edward, and if you keep getting to decide my life for me, I think I will eventually have none of my own life left." As if that were not already true, I thought again of my little pile of books, of my motorcycle, which had begun as chance to see him, but which I had grown to love, and which I had now forever lost access to. Thanks both to his overprotectiveness, to Charlie's loss of trust, born of my breaking Charlie's trust to clean up Edward's messes, of dreams lost because I had not even bothered to imagine a future during the gray months of this last winter. A strangled noise fell from Edward's lips, and I felt ashamed at the thought. I was intensely grateful he could not read my mind, but it was clear my words had done enough harm. Before I could take it back, though, he was responding. "What do you need? Tell me anything." I laughed. "Prove it." The word slipped out, with a sarcastic bite that I hadn't meant to say aloud. "But actually..." "What?" "Actually, yeah, prove it. If he wanted me back, he could prove that things would be different." My brain started working on that, thinking what he could do differently. I was only half aware of what Edward was saying now. "Prove what?" "Bella, I love you. Bella, I love you more than you could possibly." Edward stopped and closed his eyes, seeming to think for a moment. I waited, trying to focus on my anger, and not on the way the lowering sun shifted his hair into a dark, handsome shade that made me want to In a flash of movement, Edward was no longer at the tree. It took my slow human eyes a moment to find him again in the darkness. My eyes slid through the trees, searching for him, before I caught a second flutter of movement directly ahead of my feet. Edward Cullen was kneeling in front of me, left knee on the forest floor, right knee at a rigid 90-degree angle. My breath caught. The end.